And speaking of which, I love your spontaneous interpretation of one of the robbers' voices, how there's obviously a nod to a very famous Austrian actor, bodybuilder.
That was very last minute, and I just sort of someone I think said, "Oh, you should try it sounding like him." And so I just did it, and then it sort of stuck, and it was good.
It
Okay,
was
so
great,
so
right?
we went that way as it was to my voice, so that's what I chose to do. It was fantastic. I hope that everyone will listen to the Bremen Town Musicians. Anyways,
Do it now.
do it now. Go to YouTube. Welcome to another episode of the Table of Content. I am one of your hosts, Albert Saenz, joined with the fantastically fun, the fabulously fashionable Michael Steele. Michael Steele, hello. How are you?
I'm doing great, Albert. Fabulous, actually. I'm happy to be here. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's always a good day to sit down and talk stories, to talk with you. So yeah, I'm good.
Great. Yeah.
And today we get to talk with the audience about a production that we did, what we're calling sort of a live in-studio production, a Grimm's tale. We adapted the Bremen Town Musicians. Are you familiar with this story?
I am. It was one of my sort of favorite fairy tales growing up. I love the sense of leaving a bad situation, starting on an adventure, and then having one's plans sort of unfold at the moment, and then switching and making friends along the way, and the fact that it's all with animals.
Right. If you haven't seen what we're talking about, Bremen Town Musicians, go to our YouTube channel for We Are One Body Audio Theater, or you can go to our website and track it down through the listings there. But go listen and watch, because this is a little bit different. It's actually did the whole thing in studio with sort of all the cast at once, and we had foley sound effects, right? So we're making the sounds,
Yes.
and then there was music. So this one was a lot of fun. So if you haven't watched it, go sit down and watch it. You can watch it with your family, and then you can come back and listen to Michael and I review Bremen. So what was your initial thoughts on the production?
Oh, my initial thoughts were I wanted to be part. You guys looked like you were having so much fun. Like you said, it was with the Foley, and we not too long ago had Matt Mann here, the sound engineer here
Right,
at Audio
right.
Theater, and to see him and you in action and employing your talents, and then the wonderful, talented volunteers who dedicate their time and energies to telling stories and just having fun doing it, and especially the individual characters or the individual personalities that they put into it, right? I was thinking of the rooster. I think he was played by Smetanka.
Thomas Smetanka.
Thomas Smetanka, right? Just how he's, if you see the YouTube video, he's this big guy and he's got like this high rooster voice. It was crazy. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I think you look at everyone who played their characters, right? I mean, from the rooster to the dog to the donkey to the cat, and they really sort of gave their personality, and they gave their life into it. They sort of brought it to what, because it's one thing when you read a story, right? You
Yeah.
read a story and your brain fills in the gaps, right? That's where you say, this is where you use your imagination. It's the thing about stories and books. But then you have someone else sort of take their interpretation and they put into it their own interpretation. And suddenly it makes it obviously a bit more real, because you're listening to someone else, well, what did they think the donkey sounded like? What did they think the rooster sounded like? Or the
Yes.
cat or the dog? And our group of voice actors, those volunteers, they really, really just did a bang up job on the way that they brought those characters to life.
Yeah, top shelf.
Yeah. And it was fun. I appreciate you saying that because uh, that's what it's supposed to be, right? Like,
Yeah.
aside from the fact that we have these desires here at Audio Theater to tell good stories, we really have a large desire to have fun, so that what we're doing is enjoyable, right? So we want to keep doing it, and our volunteers want to keep doing it. It's like, oh, that was fun. That was
Yes.
a great time,
Yeah.
and it was fun. We did a couple rehearsals before, and then we did the final day of, and we did another rehearsal that day, and then we did the actual recording. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, and from the little mess ups to the bloopers, and then trying to get the sounds just right. And there was laughter, and there was smiling, and everyone just had a really good time. There was a lot of smiles,
That's great.
so smiles are a good indication that you're doing something good and fun.
Yeah. Right. If and I think that goes into effective storytelling. If you're enjoying it, if the storyteller's enjoying it, if the actors, actresses are enjoying it, then that is projected onto audience, and it makes the experience a lot more enjoyable itself.
I've heard it said many times over the years, like when someone is reading or doing kind of a public speaking, they say, okay, now say it, but say it with a smile, right?
Yes.
And it makes it sound different, right? Versus just, okay, so I'm reading the line. Okay, now say it with a smile. Okay, now I'm reading the line. It comes out different.
Yes.
So, but in this case, we weren't even telling people, okay, say it again, smiling. They were smiling naturally, and they were laughing in the midst of the production. And it gives it a different vibe also, right? Because a lot of the other productions that we've done here at Audio Theater, we sort of what we call full production. So we get people in, we do their lines individually. Sometimes we have more than one actor, and we do a lot of post-production work. But for this one, all the cast is in there doing it at once. So they're playing off of each other.
Yes.
Everyone is seeing and listening to each other the way that they deliver their lines. And it creates this energy, right? And
Yes.
the vibe is different, and everyone's having a good time. And there's just these natural smiles. So when people are telling their lines, and then they get to see that people are sort of laughing or smiling what they're doing because it's sort of comedic,
Right.
it all just feeds itself.
Right.
And it's a wonderful way to do this production, and this is sort of the beginning of, we're going to do more of these types of productions.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'll have to be a part of them.
Yes, I will. I hope to audition. So I can see how that dynamic of spontaneity adds to the energy. And even though the story is familiar, it's a Grimm's fairy tale, and it's widely known, and it's been performed and read and interpreted probably from the time it was written. But this time it was unique and special and irreplaceable because of the people who came together to act it out.
Right.
Right. And that's what makes it special. I think it's similarly along the lines of classical music. Everyone knows Beethoven's fifth or ninth symphony, but then in the individual moment, when you have all the musicians performing it, at that particular moment, it's something familiar and yet special, irrepeatable, and different in its interpretation.
I like the reference to classical music, because especially sort of in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 years. I know people have been doing this a lot longer, but really in the last 10 to 15 years, you've seen some of these people that have sort of embraced classical music, but they've put their own sort of spin on it, right? Because a lot of people hear classical music and they think the classic symphony orchestra, or they think the classic piano. But some of these people have come in and they've sort of energized classical music, and you're thinking,
Yes.
wait a second, this isn't classical music. Well, what is it? Like, there's these two guys, I forgot what they're called, but it's these two, I'm not sure if they're brothers or friends, but they play cello. And they're both two cello players, but they play cello as if it was the most sort of rock enhanced energy, and it's like,
right.
wow, this is, you wouldn't think about classical music. And some people might say, oh, well, they're ruining, Beethoven or Mozart's or, Vivaldi's creations. Like, no, they're not doing that. I don't think they're ruining it. I think they interpret it, and they said they give a different sort of energy to it. So
Yes.
we take this classic tale, which is, probably over 150 years old. I don't know how old the Bremen is actually, the Bremen Town Musicians, but we give it our own sort of interpretation,
Yes.
and these actors bring it to life in their own way. And suddenly it's different because someone might say, "Oh yeah, I remember that story." Okay, good. But have you heard us tell the story?
Right.
No? Okay, well, you should see what we did to it.
Yes. And speaking of which, I love your spontaneous interpretation of one of the robbers' voices, how there's obviously a nod to a very famous Austrian actor, bodybuilder,
Yeah,
governor,
right. Whoever that is,
whoever that may be.
that was very last minute, and I just sort of, someone I think said, "Oh, you should try it sounding like him," and so I just did it, and then it sort of stuck, and it was good. Okay,
was
so
great, right?
so we went that way as it was to my voice, and that's what I chose to do. It was fantastic. I hope that everyone will listen to the Bremen Town Musicians. Anyways.
Do it now.
Do it now. Go to YouTube. So but again, that sort of spontaneous stuff comes up, and someone says, "Yeah, just go with it." So we went with it, and it worked out, and it was fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think sometimes it's those things that you don't plan for. Like you try really hard, and then suddenly something else happens, and it turns out to be the best decision. And so it was good. The whole thing really came out great, and we've gotten really good feedback on it, on the story, on the way we did the presentation.
Yeah.
So again, we're really excited to sort of do more of these sort of live in studio productions.
Yeah. I have a question, Albert. How do you go about promoting these productions, and how do you invite people to participate and get involved?
Sure, that's a good question. We have sort of, first and foremost, we have a list of volunteers for audio theater, and we sort of reach out to them through our email chain. But then, depending on the scope of it, we try to post out a bunch of flyers where we can. Local college, local other community areas, and we put up the flyers, and wait to see if we get contacts through email or phone calls, and and it works. We start seeing people respond and say, "Oh, can I audition? Can I audition?" But one of the easiest things to do right now really is drop us an email from our website, go to our contact. Even if you don't even know what's happening, I said you could say, "Hey, I want to audition for a production. What do you have coming up?" And we'd be happy to give you a list of upcoming productions that you could audition for. So really, I mean, again, you keep an eye out on social media, because we do also we do social media posts, sort of saying, "Hey, coming up next, if you're interested in auditioning." So we do that on our Facebook page. And we put up calls, we put up some social media like on Instagram. So really, you just got to keep an eye out. But, if you don't see anything, it's like one of those, like when they do with the job applications, we're not currently hiring,
Right.
But please give us your resume and, in future. But
Yeah, we'll
really,
keep you on the file.
Right. But just call and say, "Can I audition?" And, we can always, get people in just to audition with a particular story.
Great.
And then we should say, "Oh, hey, you know what? They'd probably be really good for this next story." And then we can sort of narrow it down. But so the door is always open, the mic's always on, waiting for someone to come in and audition and share their talents. And there's probably a place to put a voice.
Right. Yeah. I had the chance to participate in a live production at a local retirement center last summer, and same experience. Everyone here is super welcoming, super friendly, super helpful, even to like someone of minimal experience. And so yeah, it was a really good experience. I'm looking forward to being part of future productions as well, and encourage you as well to, if you're interested, if you're local, look us up.
So, the story itself on Bremen is, it's a fun fairy tale, right? I mean, animals talking and animals planning an escape for their future lives. But it's it's a good story of a life led in one particular direction and then feeling the call to do something different,
Mm,
right? So you've got this donkey who's getting old, you got a dog who's getting old, you have a cat who's getting older, and you have a rooster who's about to be at the end of his rope,
mm,
and they all feel like they're trying to find a way to continue to live instead of potentially dying and being,
yes.
and their initial concept is that let's be musicians together. And
Right.
they set out on a journey,
Yeah.
right? And I think if you strip away sort of just the standard story, the fairy tale part of it all, that's that's a story that many of us go through in our lives. Like, oh, I feel like I need to do something different. Or
Mm,
you feel, sort of metaphorically speaking, I feel like I'm dying inside and I'd rather keep living. What do I need to do to keep living? What decision do I need to make? What town do I need to go to? What life change will allow me to continue to live versus, dying interiorly?
right. Right. The story brings out those elements in a very eloquent way. And I think that that's part of the appeal. I think it's even more appealing to us uh, as Americans because we have such a strong work ethic, and we're this idea is held out to us like you need to work until retirement, and then retirement is when it's supposed to all sort of come together, right? But I feel the story is more a commentary on the value of one's um, personhood or donkeyhood, roosterhood, cathood, whatever, right? Beyond what we do, right? The overarching theme is they've reached the end of their utility. And so the commentary is like, well, you're no longer useful, therefore your life no longer has value, right? That's utilitarianism at its worst, right? But the fact is, as long as there's life, as long as we are who we are meant to be, like you were saying, there is that dying to our one aspect of ourselves. But I think that's also part of the human experience is like there's that dying to self, but that dying needs to happen in order for something bigger and greater and more beautiful or a newer life, right? Which for the animals themselves is something they didn't even enter into their plans. They were going to be musicians, right? Um, right. I feel like it's that human experience of dying, living a dying life in order to die a living death, and that's taken from Plato. Actually, he kind of had that inkling that we go through life, and every day has its sort of moments of dying to oneself, but then it also has its moments of like living for something greater, you know, living a higher form of existence.
Right, right. I mean, it's people talk about forest fires, and I'm not being callous to anyone who's suffered in the midst of really bad forest fires, especially recent events. But
Mm,
I've heard it explained that the natural occurrence of forest fires is somewhat of a necessity because it 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 yes, it destroys a lot of the beautiful forest, but what happens is it actually propagates a newer, stronger force. Things kind of grow up, right? You have the ash, you have all the things that sort of break down from the fire, but then it can actually help to stimulate the future. So while no one really wants to see the destruction of a forest or other things in nature that sort of follow that course,
sure.
what happens afterwards,
Yeah.
right, is life can sort of come over again, right? Like it can start over, it can grow up, it can grow stronger, and
Right.
that's just part of the human experience. You were talking about the human experience, right? We don't get to live forever, but through what God's created plan
Yeah.
is new life should always be coming, right?
Yes.
Because of the openness to the creation of life. So it should be this cycle, right? But before that death, whether it's sort of the daily dying to self or the end of our life sort of death, that
Mm,
time in between, there's those opportunities to live contingent upon the choices that we make, right? So
right.
the animals decide we're going to go be musicians now.
Yes.
We're not going to be just farm animals or hunting animals or house animals. We're going to go lead that life. And they make that decision, and
Yes.
we make those kinds of decisions.
Right.
I am not going to do this thing anymore. I'm now going to make this choice,
Right.
and that one may lead to its own, again, interior dying at some point, right? People have a career change,
Sure.
and, it's like, I'm not going to be a fisherman anymore.
Right.
Now I'm going to be an engineer,
Right.
or I'm not going to be a musician. Now I'm going to be a computer programmer,
Right.
So people can swing the pendulum in their lives
Yeah.
and go on a one path, and then maybe it's another path. And a lot of people spend most of their life in one particular choice. But
Right.
like you said, there's still the daily dyings, but it helps to sort of continue on our life towards whenever our earthly death will occur.
Right. Right. Can we pause and sort of zoom in on that moment of decision? Right. For each of these animals, they have come to this moment where they have hit a wall, so to speak, of their utility, right? Or age or whatever. And now their lives are in danger. And yet they make that decision. And I can imagine, I don't know if you've had this same experience, but in those moments of decision in my own life where the future is not certain, and yet I know a change is necessary, there's a sense of fear, right? There's, like you were saying, there's a sense of sometimes sadness and nostalgia at looking back at what I know needs to be left behind, right? But at the same time, there's also I don't know, the sparkle of a new adventure, the sparkle or the energy of a hope or a dream, and also the energy of just the unknown. Like how is it going to unfold? I think about that scene in The Hobbit where Bilbo runs out of his house. He's like, "I'm going on an adventure," right? And it's just that's so it at that moment. The animals are like, "Let's do this. We're going to be musicians in Bremen," right? And I can imagine there's that sort of emotion wrapped up with that decision. I don't know. Maybe that's my own subjective interpretation, but
No, I think those kind of decisions, especially the bigger ones, right? Because for the
yeah,
animals, it was a complete shift from the lives they had been leading most of their animal lives,
right.
right? It was going to be a complete shift.
Yeah,
My wife and I have moved across the country twice, you
yeah,
know, and there was, this, what are we going to do? This sense of anxiety, this sense of worry, a
sure.
lot of emotion wrapped up in it. But you were right. In the midst of it is this, it's an adventure, and we're going to see where God is leading us,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing, right? I think some people want to look at those decisions, and some people are like, "How could you do that?" Other
Mm,
people would be like, I could never do that," or they think this has got to be it. Then you're making this
mm,
kind of decision,
mhm.
right? You're picking up your family and moving across the world. You were farm animals, and now you're going to be musicians. Like
Yeah.
that's going to be it.
Yes.
But if you get to the end of the story, they don't go to Bremen.
Right.
They decide that they're going to lead peaceful, happy lives in this house that they took from the robbers,
Yes.
and they're going to enjoy their lives singing their songs just together there in this house.
Yes.
They didn't end up going to Bremen,
Right.
right? So what may look like on the outside as a sort of a choice of finality may not even get you to where you're going. I had a
Right.
spiritual director tell me once, in the midst of a big life decision, he said, just start swimming in that direction.
Yeah.
And I was headed for one direction, and almost instantly of just stepping out in fear and anxiety and worry, but trying to do the right thing, I started swimming in a direction and ended up at another place.
Yeah.
So
Right.
a lot of times the decisions that we need to make, we just have to take that first step, even if it's uncertain, even if it's anxious, right? And we find out, oh, that was to get me over here. So the animals were like, we're going to go be musicians.
Right.
Turns out what they really wanted and desired was to have a life of peace in this house in the country,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. Yeah, there's that old saying that God can't steer a ship that hasn't left the port, right? That idea of like go, and that's always been a question in my own mind. Like, where does human initiative begin on the one hand, and where does God's divine providence end on the other, right? Is it just all God? Well, yes, in one sense, but if I don't do anything to get it going, like he'll work together with my freedom, right? The
Mm-hmm.
decisions, like you were saying, the decisions that we make, or as like a spiritual director told me as well, God has a way of getting his way, right? But yeah, there's that whole dynamic of doing what we're doing to the best of our ability, and then being open to allowing ourselves to be guided by God's providential hand in grace. And it's amazing, right? Like you were saying, we can make our plans, but then he's ultimately in charge. He has the plan with a capital P, right?
But we won't find out those plans until we leave port,
Yeah, right.
you know. So the animals had to leave their ports, right? They had to leave their respective farms or owners,
Yeah.
and step out onto the road together. You know, the most unlikely of combinations. I mean, a donkey, a dog, a cat, and a rooster.
Exactly.
But that unlikely set of circumstances led them to find their path.
Right.
And I think that's a great also just sort of narrative for us. You know, it may seem like the most unlikely path for us to follow, and it may look like it will contradict everything that's going on around you and may not make sense to other people
Mm.
and may seem like this is a terrible choice. Why am I doing this? But something inside of you says this is the way to go to have the life that God intended for us.
Right.
So you step out there, you're like, okay, we're going to leave port.
Yeah.
I do not know about this.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe sometimes you end up, getting thrown around and tossed around in the sea,
Right.
but you end up ultimately, as long as the intention and the will of the person is to do God's will,
Right.
you'll find your way, and God will lead you there
Yeah.
somehow at some point,
Yeah.
and you'll find out that you're living the life that you were supposed to be leading.
Right. Yeah. God wants us to be happy and ultimately to be happy with him in heaven. And so this whole life is a journey. You talked earlier about that dynamic of setting out and leaving things behind. And I feel like that happens on a linear level, but it also happens on a vertical level, a spiritual level as well, like the leaving behind of attachments or ignorance or whatever, and a continuing entering into a deeper and higher relationship with God. It starts here, but then it continues on in eternity, right? So, yeah. Yeah. And like you mentioned, what a scrappy bunch of animals. I was just thinking as you were talking, the Grimm brothers, a donkey, a rooster, a dog, and a cat. Did I miss anyone?
No, that's all.
Right, right. But like you think about it, these are scrappy animals, right? A donkey brays and kicks and bites, right? A cat has claws and can be really, cranky. Rooster, waking people up in the morning, big spurs, right? And then a dog, of course, man's best friend, but can also be a formidable animal as well. Yeah. And then they all work together towards their common goal.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been reviewing the Bremen Town Musicians. Please, if you have not watched our production of it, I encourage you again to go to our YouTube channel for We're One Body Audio Theater and take a listen to it and enjoy it. It really is, more than anything, really, it's an enjoyable story and enjoyable production. And I want to say again, we are going to be doing more productions like that. So I encourage you to keep watching, keep tuning in. And as Michael was good enough to note earlier, also, if you see the production, if you see Bremen, you're like, wow, that looks like a lot of fun, and you want to participate in a production like that, reach out to us and drop us a line and say, hey, how can I be involved? Because even if you're not interested in being a voice actor, you can tell we have foley work to do. Maybe you're musically inclined. I mean, this fine fellow here plays the banjo.
That's right.
So
yes. I dabble. I know just enough to be dangerous.
He's pretty dangerous. So there's ways to be involved in this production, even if you don't want to share a voice. So if you're interested, please reach out to us. Michael Steele, always good to sit down with you. I've enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to our next conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Albert. Likewise, I really enjoyed your insights. And can I say it? Can I say it?
You want to say it?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. There, I said it.
They're gonna smash it.
And smash that like button. Smash it.
Smash it good. Ladies and gentlemen, until the next episode, we wish you all the best, and we look forward to returning again. Until that time, be good, stay safe. Peace.
Peace.